What do you make of the recent statements from Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice and their intention now to begin maybe prosecuting, attacking, arresting? What are they going to do to dissenting parents who don't believe that critical race theory should be taught in schools? What do you make of this recent position that they just came out with? And, tell us what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously trying to intimidate. They like everything I just mentioned, how we have these great bridge issues of CRT, what's going on with the schools, what's going on with the COVID. That has the left or the Biden regime, however you want to look at it, that has them very scared because they see that we're going to have this massive groundswell of support. So what do they want to do? They want to nip it in the bud. And they've been very successful between their allies in the media and then what you outlined in the national security state, how now the national security state does not any longer have a target overseas necessarily. There's still some, but the Biden regime is way more focused on internal. They're shifting that focus now onto people that dissent from the current regime. And really, the January 6th narrative gave them a great test run. They were able to take one incident that day, be completely and totally dishonest with it. They've had the media help them every step of the way, saying like, okay, the Trump supporters beat to death a police officer with a fire extinguisher. That was the common narrative until it was actually formally debunked by Darren Beatty. And then they haven't obviously been honest about how much infiltration they had. We can get into all that, but the way they've been able to weaponize the January 6th narrative, it's been very sticky and like they have not really been checked. We still have political prisoners that have been detained without due process. That's still ongoing. And so now, because they didn't receive any pushback from that, none of them have been held accountable for all of that. That's still ongoing. Now they say, okay, let's nip this school board issues in the bud. They had the National Teachers Union folks who we know are dishonest actors based on the way that they've held our kids hostage with the COVID crisis. Had them write a letter saying they feel very threatened by the potential of violence and potential terrorism at these school board meetings. And then a week later, AG Garland's there saying, well, it sounds like these guys could really be domestic terrorists, which is very key language. I mean, in one hand, you want to laugh at it, but when the AG is saying that, hey, you could be a domestic terrorist just for showing up to your kid's school board meeting and saying, hey, I have some issues that I would like to discuss with you, that could get you labeled and that all the ramifications that comes with from more surveillance being put on you to are you going to get a knock on your door and be detained and now have your due process taken away from you. Like a year ago that would have sounded obscene for me to say. That it's been kind of ridiculous, you're a conspiracy theorist. But look at what happened with the people that were in or around the Capitol on January 6th. The government's done this. The government is in the process of getting away with it, and now they're just shifting that label of domestic terrorist onto the next threat to I guess their popular support, and they want to nip this in the bud going into the 22 midterms.
Am I right to think that middle American, middle aged white women who oppose critical race theory in their schools, 45-year-old Mary with 3 kids from Oklahoma, is now considered or will be a domestic terrorist by our Department of Justice, who are expert in detaining people illegally and torturing people around the world and killing and murdering and all these horrible things? Mary from Oklahoma is now on the list because she doesn't want to be told that she doesn't want her 6-year-old daughter to be told that she is part of a white supremacy culture and must stand aside for people of color. Is that where we are, dude?
That's where we're at, and that's because we didn't check the fact that Mary's mother, somebody's grandmother, who was near the Capitol on January 6th wearing a MAGA hat, had the FBI kick in their door, and take their electronic devices. Like that basically went unchecked. There's some folks out there that are pushing back against it, but they're in the minority. They're being labeled as white supremacists, domestic terrorists, or whatever too. And so that's where this is heading. I mean, the regime right now will not tolerate any dissent whatsoever. And that's the clear message right now. And I think they're going to try to, between the vaccine, mandates, which people are losing their jobs over, and then this level, I really think they're just seeing how much people can take until they either comply or they do something stupid. A lot of this has to do, I think a lot of this is to provoke a reaction, to get somebody who's at their wits end to do something really dumb and then be able to absolutely hammer them and use them as an example as to why we need this enhanced surveillance, this enhanced security state protecting the American people.
You said a minute ago that if we had said this a year ago, it would have sounded obscene or absurd. I feel like every year I'm saying the same thing about things that we once thought were conspiracy,
Yeah.
things that I thought were fringe are no longer fringe. People called me fringe years ago. Now everything that we talked about is actually coming true. I once wrote about how the left wants to sterilize your boys in the future. It's coming. And people thought I was insane. And now a guy on the Pennsylvania state legislature just introduced a bill, or at least said he was going to introduce a bill that would have been forced sterilization of men over 40 or men who have had 3 kids, whichever comes first. I thought that was a joke. It's not a joke. Have
First
you
too. Yeah.
have you seen anything, any reason for us to think that somebody somewhere in the regime, not you, not an outsider, not a reformer, not a reactionary, not a revolutionary, is somebody inside going to put their foot on the brakes and slow this thing down? I don't think so. I said a year ago maybe that that unfortunately we seem to be waiting on someone on the left to be like, whoa, 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 we can't just kill them, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you see any sign of it slowing down, or should we just take this latest attack, or at least the statement of future attack coming on Mary from Oklahoma? Is there any, we just put this one more in the trend, right? And so we can draw this line and see where it's going, and have to take action back based on that. Anything slowing it down at all, Joe?
I really don't think so. I mean, there's a couple people that are on the right that are in the system, so to speak, that are fighting for us. I do feel, but expecting the other side to say, "Wait a sec, this is just too much, guys. I can't go along with this." I think we've seen what happens with those people. Like, where's Tulsi Gabbard? And that's not a ding on Tulsi. I actually really like her, but she went internal and said, "Hey, I'm going after all the corruption on this side." And I don't know what they did to her. I don't know what the backstory is. I can't pretend. I've never spoken to her in my life. We don't hear from her anymore, you know. And there's been a few other examples like that. And then Bernie, they essentially bought him out, or whatever they did with him. So we obviously can't expect it to happen from the left. And then the right, like you said, we have to really take out the GOP first and make that party our own and make them actually do the right thing. But even the folks that I feel that are on the right, that are in the system, that are fighting for us, the establishment does so much to just try and take away their voice. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look at Matt Gaetz. I mean, there was nobody on the right when they were coming after Matt Gaetz, and they have all these crazy accusations that have now been totally debunked. The guy was being extorted. There was very few people on the actual establishment right that were like, "Hey, Matt Gaetz, you can come to CPAC." They tried to kick. I was there. They tried to kick the guy out of CPAC. I mean, Matt Braynard held an event for Matt Gaetz, but Gaetz wasn't allowed in the actual tent there. And then same thing, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Multiple Republicans voted to kick her off of all of her committees. She's plotted her own way because she's a great fighter. We got Paul Gosar's in there usually swinging away at things, but the few that are fighting for us on the right, like, they need backup. Again, that's why I'm running for Congress. But I think really what people have to realize, that it's on us. Like, there's nobody coming. There's no plan to trust. Like, we actually have to do the work. We have to get out there and grind. We have to build our own social networks, and we have to do the really unsexy things like register people to vote and get out and vote. No matter how hopeless you think it is, if you're not out there registering people to vote and you're not out there voting, then you have become the black pill. Like, there is no hope then. So I think that's the biggest message I have, is that, hey, it's on us, man. There's no backup.
It is on us. There's no backup. No one's coming to save us. We have to do this together. And there's no counting on the quote pendulum of history. Okay. My mom always says this to me. She's one of the few people from my family that still engages with me on a genuine level on these issues. Most of my family's real leftist, crazy feminist children of the 60s. They still think feminism is about getting women the right to have a checkbook. I mean, I'm at my wit's end with them. There's no convincing them at this point. But my mom always says, it'll just work out in the end. The pendulum will swing back. The overreach will
Yes.
happen and it'll just swing back. And I said, Mom, that may be true on a macro level. If you're reading about history in 100 years, you'll look back and you'll be like, oh, the pendulum swung, it swung back the other way. But right now, today, we need people to take action. We need to do things. All that pendulum swinging, all this working itself out in the end stuff is just the end result of countless people making changes on the margin, which is what I'm trying to do here with my media outreach and the Liminal Order and working with men all across the country. And that's what you're doing here by trying to by running and winning your seat in Congress, and then hopefully winning re-election a number of times after that, unless you get bumped up the food chain, boss, because I could see that coming for you as well. You got to get out there and do stuff. There's no time for black pilling here, right? People who take the black pill and choose to check out of this altogether aren't helping. They're actually hurting.